I wanted to make sure that we talk about three things today. We think about how a crisis fuels innovation. We'll be looking at inspiration from historical crises and the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace. We'll also be evaluating innovation momentum that we see right now with COVID-19. And then we'll wrap up today's session talking about how to lead courageously during these times to continue to fuel innovation. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to ask Colin, who's helping me with a Zoom session today, to start a quick poll. To what extent has innovation momentum increased in your organization with COVID-19? So 1 would be not at all, and 5 would be very significantly. So to what extent has innovation momentum increased in your organization with COVID-19? If you just join me for the poll right now by submitting your answer, that'd be great. Give that just a moment as you have a chance to respond to the poll, and I'll let Colin present the results as when he sees that most everyone's responded. Okay, so what we're seeing from all of you joining us today, about half of you are saying it's about the same. We have about the same momentum, or maybe slightly higher. But then a number of you are showing radical or very high momentum in innovation, which is pretty consistent with what we're seeing with a number of our clients, that a crisis tends to fuel innovation and give you the opportunity and the catalyst to move quickly. So thanks for joining us and giving us your perspective on the momentum that COVID-19 has created in innovation. Let's continue on, and I want to share with you just a bit around trends that have happened in the marketplace that have accelerated innovation. What can we learn from that? This particular slide that's showing technology advances and innovation shifts, you can see that the creation of disruptive technology and the pace of accelerated adoption in the market have been historic catalysts for innovation. So we know that when technology enters a market, depending on how quickly it's adopted in the marketplace, shows you the level of disruption for that innovation. And so if you take a look at this particular graphic, you can see launching in the 1940s, it took 30 years for color TVs to hit a 90% adoption rate. Whereas now, looking at closer into the 2000s, it took the digital camera only about 3 years to hit a 90% adoption. The speed and the proliferation of how innovation hits a market and then scales quickly impacts us all so very much, so that it's not just the innovation itself, but how we scale it and how we embrace the change that becomes important. If we think about these two examples on the next slide, with just some that we've all experienced recently, if you think about Airbnb being the largest hotel chain which has no beds, fueled by technology innovation, or Uber, the same thing, the largest cab company that has no cars. If we go on to the next slide, just think of what's happened with COVID-19 in and of itself today. We have now one of the largest meeting rooms in the world, Zoom, which has no physical space. So certainly technology drives a huge amount of disruption and allows us to embrace innovation and ride it very quickly and scale it into the marketplace. On the next slide, what you'll see is a wonderful graphic from Frank Diana from Tata Consultancy. And he helps us see graphically the impact of technology and innovation more broadly, not just on global issues, but socially and in areas of business. Look at how different advances in technology have made huge shifts in our world ecosystem with cyber warfare or with a circular economy. By monitoring and exploring disruptive shifts, leaning into them, we understand them better and use them as fuel to anticipate change and to create innovation opportunities. Thinking about our history, go on to the next slide where you think about Apollo 13 in the 1970s. Apollo 13 was 200,000 miles away from Earth when an oxygen tank exploded 56 hours into flight, forcing the team to abandon their mission and switch their priority from, instead of going to the moon, to just get back to Earth safely. One of our famous quotes around this particular crisis and the innovation that the team pursued was by Ken Krantz, the NASA flight director, when he said, "I've never lost an American in space, and I'm sure as hell not going to do it now. This crew is coming home, and you've got to believe it. Your team must believe it, and we must make it happen." So when he challenged his team there at the NASA Space Center to come up with a solution to get the Apollo 13 crew home, he had full confidence that the team would do it. And he set the bar very high that failure was not an option. And the team mobilized. NASA Flight Operation mobilized teams of engineers with diverse skill sets to work around the clock creating solutions. And as Fred Heise said with an interview with CBS News in the day, he said, we have to have not only plan A, but plan B, C, and D, and so on. There are hundreds of people on this mission to solve this problem. We have to get this team back. So I think that reminds me a bit of what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19, that we have to find solutions to deal with this pandemic, and what the lessons that we can learn with the clarity of purpose, the diversity of skill sets, and the way that the Apollo 13 team rapidly created prototypes and rapidly iterated their designs through testing to ensure that they created the right solution to get their team home. Another example that I wanted to share with you today around looking at historical lessons in crisis is something that's closer to where I live here in the United States, the Great Smoky Mountains. Back in November of 2016, the Great Smoky Mountains had an extraordinary wildfire that erupted due to a campfire accident. More than 16,000 acres burned and 14,000 were forced to evacuate, with 2,500 buildings being destroyed. Within a week of the crisis hitting, 5 Rotary clubs in the county formed a collaborative to join with local government to help. The Rotarians put over 450 people to work sorting donated clothing and food and supplies in a 125,000 square foot abandoned warehouse that they turned into a free Walmart. They had an average of 3,500 people a day coming in to this distribution center for help. And how did they do it? It was just a leader stepping up, mobilizing other leaders to come together as a team to meet the needs of the individuals in their area. They used communications like email, simple emails, to mobilize a distribution list telling people daily what the needs were of the community. I could remember as a local Rotarian getting my daily e-blast from the head of the Rotary Club in Sevier County. And one of the funniest ones I received during that tragic time was when he wrote a note that he said he'd gotten 4 tractor trailer loads of Pop-Tarts. And they didn't need any more Pop-Tarts, but what they did need was water and toiletries. So clear communication, clear focus, mobilizing teams, all a part of getting an innovation formulated and coming to life to help people in need quickly. Interestingly enough, the Federal Emergency Management Agency went in later and explored this innovation that the Rotary Club put together to help the Great Smoky Mountain area during that crisis. And they said, who was the logistics company that helped manage this amazing transformation of the collection of resources and the distribution to the community? And it was the local Rotarian leader said, it was me. I don't have a background in logistics. I'm just a school teacher. So many times when a crisis comes to the forefront, all of us step up, bring forth our leadership skills to meet that need. So let's go on and look at some of the crisis innovations that have happened with COVID-19, with the coronavirus. we go into the next slide, I'd like for you to think about several things as I share some of the innovations that we're seeing in the marketplace. One is watch how these innovations have focused on mission critical challenges, just like what happened in the Great Smoky Mountains, where we get really clear what is the most critical challenge that a team is facing, and then align a team to champion a team and a collaborative partnership around that challenge. So really clear challenge, and then formulating a team and a collaborative partnerships to deal with that challenge. Then set the bar high in terms of fostering creativity, and then embracing rapid prototyping immediately, and then rapid prototype testing to learn and iterate and build to learn as we evolve innovations quickly to deal with the crisis. And then communicate broadly. What are we doing? What's the progress we're seeing? What else do we need? And who do we need involved to help to scale this? Those are the 4 critical things that I want you to think about as we look at some of the innovations that we've gathered. But first, let's take to a little bit of a chat question here. If you could go to your chat, I'd like to know, for your own organization, do you already have a mission critical challenge that you're facing? If you do, I'd like for you to post it in the chat so that we can better understand what your organization's established as a mission critical challenge right now. If you can share that with your colleagues on chat, that would be great. Some of the examples that I want to show today in the examples of the coronavirus and the innovations that are appearing. Some interesting things coming out of the UK. This particular set of innovations I want to share with you come from Sonia Maranchuk, who is a senior research leader from the RAND Europe Partnership. And she talks about innovation is coming together in the most inspiring ways. Researchers are working closely with policymakers and with the National Health Service providers on the front line to roll out innovations immediately. And they're doing it in circumstances that historically have taken years to bring these types of innovations to patients. They're digitally enabling consultations using video consultation and online consultation, and they're becoming now the routine versus the face-to-face in-person consultation. Perhaps one of the most inspiring things that Sonia talked about in her research were 2 things: that not only the real-time innovation that's happening in the front line, working with policy and researchers and the frontline leaders, but also how the National Health Service in the UK has started using applications like WhatsApp to mobilize a national volunteer network to support their efforts, fueling and focusing the volunteerism around the needs that they have. They've also mobilized things like a hackathon, that in 2 days, they're looking for innovations and new technologies to solve some of the COVID-19 challenges, and they're putting 164 million euros towards that investment. Let's look at another innovation if we go on. We're looking at how other entities are fostering collaboration in a very bold way. This coronavirus innovation map, which was launched by Startup Link and the Health Innovation Exchange, along with the Moscow Agency of Innovation, a very giant collaborative site showing innovation that's emerging across the globe to fight COVID-19. This gives us a very easy way to go in and look at other innovations that are occurring, to mine them, to learn from them, and to either reach out, gather the perspective and bring that innovation closer to our region where we need it, or to use it as fuel for inspiration on our own innovation. They've identified 5 categories that they're using to plot and document innovations that are emerging with COVID-19 around prevention, diagnosis, treatment, information, and life and business adaptations. So a wonderful collaborative move there by Startup Link. If we go on and look at other collaborative sites going on monitoring and publishing innovations, you'll see that on the next slide, Another example is by the Global Innovation Exchange, where their key objective is to aggregate and highlight innovations across 12 COVID-19 categories, trying to categorize the innovations that are emerging quickly during the crisis, allowing people to pull on them, apply them, or use them as inspiration in their own areas for their particular work. They've even allowed for submissions down to the student level. They're inviting everyone to get involved in the culmination of innovations to fight COVID-19. Let's keep going and look at some of the emerging new solutions coming into the marketplace. A surge in urgent innovation, if you think about the masks that are needed to protect frontline workers in dealing with COVID-19, look at here you can see the SMOOD, the virus protection SMOOD, or the 3D printed door handle that can allow you to open a door by using your arm instead of your hands, or even a digitally printed digital bracelet now, that a wrist device that measures and warns you about facial touching, again, to help you try to remember not to touch your face in this virus pandemic. If we go on to look at other innovations that we're seeing in the market space, you'll see that interesting things coming out. TempTrack has created a wireless wearable temperature monitoring device that allows clinicians and hospitals to remotely monitor fever with little to no direct patient contact. It's a simple patch that goes onto the patient, monitors their temperature, and then Bluetooth communicates with the provider. Or if you look in the top right, you'll see one of the largest online retailers in China successfully using autonomous robot vehicles to deliver food, medicine, and other supplies in Wuhan. Or the last, the bottom right example, that where organizations are experimenting with drone technology to go in and distribute UV lights to help to sanitize interior spaces that historically were not allowed, drones were not allowed to fly indoors. But now with using AI technology and other deep space automated technology, they're able to control these drones in interior spaces safely. Let's look at another example of a crisis innovation that's happened by a provider. So you have interesting things where providers, people are very close to the delivery of care that are emerging as frontline innovators. Here's an invention by Dr. Rice Thomas, where he said, I was desperately concerned about the lack of intensive care unit ventilators to deal with the pandemic. And so he created his own. He designed in 3 days several prototypes that he began to use with patients that were a simplistic version of a ventilator, but they worked perfectly. And for a large number of patients, this simple version of a ventilator was as much as they needed, and it allowed them to use the more intensive ventilators for patients that had a more complex health problem. So these are where innovations are occurring globally, where they're being collected and published for all of us to use. And then you see innovations happening right on the front line by organizations like providers. Look at this other example. It's from a regional organization here close to us in Chattanooga, the Chattanooga Whiskey Company, where they're doing what I call asset-based innovation. They're a whiskey company, and they're looking at the assets that they have and how can they help respond and be a part of the solutions with COVID-19, where they've launched their own hand sanitizer. Very interesting, beautiful bottling, but I hate to tell you, but Chattanooga Whiskey's just posted on their website that they're sold out of this great new product line. But you'll see asset-based innovation happening like this with providers. If we go on, some of the things that we're doing with our own clients is helping them look at ways to collect innovations across their domains. One of our clients here in this region is the United Way of Greater Chattanooga. And we have worked with them to help create an online Google form that they can quickly capture innovations that are happening across the region, to formulate them and publish them so others can quickly scale those ideas to go to other entities. So whether it's school teachers using, putting together food boxes and distributing them on school buses to get at-risk children fed during the crisis, or other types of innovations that are occurring. So we just invite you to be creative yourselves about how you collect and publish the innovations that are emerging in your particular arena. So as we move on, I wanted to just kind of wrap up our exploration of COVID-19 innovation by sharing some particular quotes with you today. Paul Romer, a Nobel laureate, talks about a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. The coronavirus pandemic is a similar critical situation. When priorities are clear, having that mission clear alignment, when rigid rules and regulations suddenly become pliable, we know that we have the ability to create and innovate. Leaders pay attention and change, and even far-reaching change is possible. Or another quote from Scott D. Anthony, an Insight partner: constraints are innovation enablers. Small teams are faster than big teams. We know that. So as we're putting together crisis teams, how can we put together small, nimble teams to work quickly around innovation opportunities? Tight budgets make decisions more quickly than teams with loose budgets. Tight milestones force teams to address critical assumptions early, facilitating the redirection that typifies the entrepreneurial process. So that more or less wraps up, I think, the scan of COVID-19 innovations that we're seeing in the marketplace. Many, many more I'm sure that you're aware of. What great inspiration, what silver lining opportunities that we're seeing in this amazing and very tragic pandemic. But let's move on and think about, as we move forward in the pandemic, how we lead courageously, how we go about continuing to find and mobilize others around creating innovations to address some of the challenges that we're facing in COVID-19. We like to look at the leader's foresight mindset. We spend a lot of time at Bridge Innovate looking at strategic foresight, the skills, methods, and tools to look forward, to identify strategically shifts and disruptions that are coming. We help our clients mobilize this, and there are a set of leadership skills that equip you to lead in a way where you're looking more forward. One is that you've got to crave curiosity, continue to ask others, what do you see? What are you interested in? How can we pull these things together? May we be able to connect things that we haven't connected before? Act courageously, champion innovation, get clear on what the major challenges are in your organization and formulate innovation teams around them. Welcome diversity, engage others outside of your domain, involve policymakers, involve clinicians, involve other organizations beyond your walls to bring in diverse thought around how to solve your challenges. And be bold, think outrageously about the solutions that you're formulating. Think in terms of how to connect dots that don't necessarily go together. What if you connected one area environment with another area environment to think of something even more boldly? Or think in terms of multiples. How many different options can we create, and then begin to test them and then learn through rapid prototyping and iteration? Simon Sinek, one of my favorite leadership gurus, talks about that companies that will thrive during the pandemic aren't focused on getting back to normal, but they're focused on how to create a new normal. He said the opportunity is what will we be, not to preserve what we had. If you think you're going to do the same job and you're waiting, that ship has sailed. Because while everyone else is waiting for the old ship to return, you will have embarked on a new journey. And I think this is the inspiration for us as we lead courageously during this crisis, is to lean into it, to embrace it, to identify the challenges, formulate teams to solve those challenges, and form the new normal. So as we wrap up today on leading courageously, I want to leave you with 4 enablers that are particularly important, I think, during this time. One is to get beyond your own bias. We know that bias is a neurological process that our brains naturally embrace to help us sort through thousands of bits of information that come at us every day. But our bias can also inhibit our ability to be open-minded It can close down our perspective on innovation. Be aware that you have bias. Be aware that you tend to say, I can't remember how many executives have said that will never work because they have a bias around it. Be open to exploring new alternatives that you have never embraced before. Develop the tools to be intentional about open and innovative decision making. The next thing I would say for you to think about in terms of leading courageously is engage with uncertainty. Help your teams look at this opportunity as an opportunity for hope, an opportunity for innovation and creating a new future versus approaching it from an engagement of fear. Helping others adapt a bold and resilient approach to embracing these crises and coming up with strategies for not only surviving, but for thriving. And as you lead your innovation dually, not as a theater. Make sure that there is a room for failure. Only 1% of startups make it. So be aware of the fact that if you're launching bold innovation, you will have failures. That means that you're going to have to do small scale testing so that you can fail early and iterate so that when you launched your bold innovation to the marketplace, it's tried, tested, and proven. Include senior sponsorship all throughout the innovation journey and the budget behind it. Focus not only on the innovation itself, but on the business model behind it and the markets that you'll serve. Think about putting your best talent on these innovation teams, not just the folks who are available, and fuse your internal innovation team with external resources who are bringing in diverse perspectives or who are proficient and very experienced at innovation. And lastly, build a resilience nerve center that as your organization goes through these innovation and change aspects, that you have a nerve center that's constantly monitoring risk and implementing tests to evaluate and learn from those risks and to then mobilize change. Organize teams so they can mobilize those changes in agile 2-week sprint kind of aspects and create forums for executive decision making and results monitoring. So that pretty much wraps up our session today. I'll just end you with one of my favorite quotes from an innovator, Harriet Tubman, that's so famous, that mobilized the Underground Railway and mobilized 13 missions to help a number of people escape slavery. Every dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world. And I would hope that you would go forward as a leader today, mobilize innovation, help your teammates reach for the stars and change the world during this pandemic. Good luck to you all, good health, and thank you for joining us today.